Welcome everyone to today's Network at Work event. My name is Christy Kennedy. I am here to serve as your MC. Emily Jeanne Brown is an actor, musician, and embodied voice coach based in Brooklyn, New York. Through her business, OnVoice Coaching and Consulting, she works with visionary creatives, entrepreneurs, and advocates on accessing their inner resources to uncover their most dynamic, authentic, and impactful voices. So during today's session, Emily is going to leverage those skills to help us understand how to really articulate our values and who we are when we're in social settings, professional settings. This is really kind of a universally applicable workshop. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Emily, who will start off with a bit of a presentation, and then we'll have some workshopping that we'll all do together. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Christy. I like to use image and language to connect to an idea. And so I put pebbles in here on this title page because I think we can think of stones as solid material and kind of the raw material that gets polished into smooth pebbles, or that gets polished into our pitch, right? But we have to know how to polish them, how they get properly tumbled. And so we're going to be using that image of the pebble as we go throughout today's workshop. Some things you're going to need today, if you don't already have them, are something to write with, and something that would make you maybe more comfortable is something to hydrate with. So whether that's a glass of water or tea, I always like to have a little bit of something to drink nearby to wet my whistle. So I have a lot of clients ask me, how do I prepare for off-the-cuff, spontaneous speaking? And I like to talk about that in terms of integration, of a real holistic integration of your message, of your pitch, so much so aligned with your values and what you care about and who you are, that you can kind of get out of the way and just let the message shine. So that's hopefully what we're going to dig into a little bit today. A little bit about me, as Christy said, my name is Emily Jeanne Brown. I am an actor, a musician, and an embodied voice coach, and I work with clients all over the world through Zoom online. I got my BA in theater at Smith, and I got my MFA in acting at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. And I'm passionate about the human voice, creativity, and authentic expression. So I really take a holistic approach to communication work that I like to think of as creative. I like to empower people to think of their communication creatively. I am a self-professed Shakespeare nerd and also a singer-songwriter. I play my original music around New York City, and I live in Brooklyn, and I'm from California. So I have that kind of bi-coastal identity. So before we dive in, I just want to say a few things about the idea of embodied voice, which is what I call my coaching work, embodied voice coaching. And so an embodied voice integrates a person's values, creativity, and personal power with supportive vocal technique to deliver authentic, dynamic, and clear storytelling. When we speak with an embodied voice, we are speaking not just with our words, but with our whole bodies, using the resource of sensation to access our full range of expressive tools. An embodied voice will be felt by the listener as an empowering invitation. So I just wanted to share that idea with you as we dive into today's workshop. So I've broken up our system for polishing our pebbles or polishing our pitch today into 4 sections. The 4 C's is what I'm calling them. And they are calling, content, context, and connection. Those steps do sort of have a linear trajectory from one to the next, but I also wanted to create this sort of graphic to show how each of these components is really interconnected and overlaps with the others. So you'll see as we work through each of these components, how they can be doubled back on to strengthen your polishing process. One more idea that I want to define for you before we dive into the 4 C's is dropping in. So what is dropping in? Dropping in is an image used to consciously bring something more deeply into the realm of your mental, emotional, and physical awareness. So for example, we can drop in to the body and breath. I drop in, right? We can also drop in words and phrases like pebbles into a pond. So dropping in a word into the body allows us to feel the whole spectrum of what that word can express rather than just experiencing the word one-dimensionally or in a kind of flat way, right? And it helps us connect to language in a whole body, left and right brain, and emotionally resonant way. So you can see on this slide, there's a little pebble, and you're going to see the pebble weaving its way through each of the 4 C's as I explain them now. So the first C is calling. And so in this system that I'm proposing that we're going to all have the opportunity to work through together today, the first C, the first step, is connecting to your calling. And within that step, the first thing you're going to do is connect to your body, sense your breath, close your eyes, go inward. Then you're going to drop in, you can see my pebble there at number 2. In that internal space, drop in the question, what am I being called to do? What am I called to do? Drop in that question. When you feel like you're beginning to feel the ripples of that pebble that you've dropped in, you're going to come back out, open your eyes, come back into the space, and then you're going to free write the answer as it appears to you. Ideally, without censorship or judgment or critique as best you can. So free writing, not thinking this is my pitch, but just free writing that very raw material that comes from a very quiet, personal place. What am I being called to do? Then once you've done that free writing, you move on to the second C. And the second C is content. So we have our raw material. We have what came out organically. From there, we're going to look at what we wrote and go through the language, circling words that feel particularly potent to us. Maybe thinking about our values as it pertains to the work that we do in the world, things that seem to kind of highlight how we feel about ourselves and our work, right? So we'll go through and circle or highlight words or phrases, maybe 2 or 3 word phrases that we are feeling particularly connected to and sort of drawn to as it pertains to our work. And from those words and phrases, then we're going to begin to construct a statement that covers who you are, what you do, and how you do it. So this little number 2 module here within content is sort of what we normally hear about how you construct your pitch, right? It's just the what. It's what do you say? Who I am, what do I do, and how do I do it? But what I'm suggesting is that we start from a little bit more of an esoteric place, a little bit more of a raw personal place, and that we slowly hone and polish. We kind of work up to the fine grit sandpaper, but we start with the rough sandpaper, right? So that we can hone and kind of see this as a creative process. So once we get that raw material constructed into sentence form, something that feels a little more digestible and clear, then we're going to speak the statement out loud to ourselves. And this is a step that I think many of us skip, including me, right? So when I'm preparing for a presentation or when I'm, trying to integrate some language so that it feels like it can just come out organically, I have to speak it aloud. I have to try it out. I have to feel the words in my mouth before I go and do it in front of someone in a high pressure situation. So this is a great thing to do while you're doing the dishes, in the shower. When you're doing another physical activity, sometimes can be helpful, right? So there's that little pebble again. So as you speak through your statement, you're really going to think of dropping in that language into the body. So again, the idea of dropping in, if my statement is, I'm Emily Jeanne Brown and I'm an embodied voice coach, I could just say that, or I could drop it in. I'm Emily Jeanne Brown and I'm an embodied voice coach. So I'm considering each word choice. And I'm not suggesting this is how you would give your pitch in a real context, but this is a way for you to test out, what are these words bringing up for me? Do they feel authentic? Do they feel genuine? Or do I want to switch them out? So that's where this 4th step comes in. And if you feel compelled to, you can have the opportunity to switch out words and phrasing until it feels just right, until it sits really well with you, until you can drop it in and it feels like, okay, that's my pitch. That is who I am. That's what I do. That's how I do it. And that's what I want to share with people. The third C is context. So before going into the opportunity where you're going to be sharing your pitch, you want to consider, what is the context in which I'm pitching, right? What are my given circumstances? So there's that little pebble again, and you're going to take a minute imaginatively to drop into your given circumstances of this future event that you're going to be pitching in, right? So it could be a lot of different things. It could be a professional networking event, a little more formal, a social gathering like a party, maybe a date, very intimate one-on-one with a new person, maybe an interview, a formal presentation where you're introducing yourself. In each of these situations, you have a very different context. You're in a different physical space. There's a different number of people listening to you, right? There's a different kind of connection that you're trying to make. So we're considering, what are the circumstances of this event that I'm going to be pitching inside of, right? And trying to think of every possible element of that situation that could inform your experience, including your audience. Who is my audience? What do I want them to learn about me? How do I want them to feel, right? And this is a moment where you could go back to content, and based on those answers to those questions about audience, you might make some adjustments to the language, right? So you can see how those steps kind of flow in and out of each other. They don't have to be so linear. And then once you determine who your audience is, what am I curious about with this audience, right? What am I interested in? Not just how can I make them interested in me? So who are these people that I'm going to be connecting with? And what am I curious about? And then from that curiosity, what questions might I want to ask them to also create inroads for me to share about myself, right? So it's less pressure to give the pitch and do a good job. And it's more about making those authentic connections within the context, having done that preparation work. And ultimately, what do I want my audience to walk away with from that context going forward? So that leads us to number 4, the fourth C, which is connection, which is really what pitching is about, right? When you give a personal pitch, it shouldn't just be about performing and kind of getting a gold star. It should be about you feeling connected to yourself, feeling like what you're sharing is genuine and authentic to you, and feeling like you actually made a genuine connection with the person that you're pitching to, so that it's not just talking at someone, but there's a real kind of interchange going on there. There's a meeting, hopefully, of values and interests, because that's the thing that people are going to walk away from feeling impacted by, right? So here's our little pebble again. You're going to drop back into the body and the breath. This is going to happen maybe on your way to the event, maybe the morning of the event, depending on the context. You know, maybe as you walk into the restaurant for your date, whatever that is, dropping back into the body and the breath, going back to the first step, right? That calling of what's inside, feeling my own energy, my own body, so that I can come back to center. And then from that place of grounding, I meet others and I listen for words and phrases that they're saying that sort of light up or highlight my words and phrases, right? I listen for common interests. I listen for points of shared values. And when in doubt, when I'm not really sure how to integrate myself into the conversation, or, you know, I don't know where there's an opportunity for me to make my pitch, I ask a question. And I already know what question I might ask because I've already done that context preparation work of really understanding my audience and what I'm curious about with them, right? So in all of these ways, and doing this kind of really personal integration work with your message and with your pitch, you're making space, you're stepping out of the way so that when you actually show up in that moment, your pitch doesn't feel like a pitch. It shows up authentically, organically, fully integrated, and aligned with your values, because you've already done all of that integration work before that moment when you are speaking about yourself and your work in front of other people. I would love to open it up.
I see a question from Anne Seifert.
Yes.
How come I'm not curious about my audience?
That's a really interesting question. and kind of mysterious. I I don't know. I don't know why you're not curious about your audience, but what I would challenge you or invite you to try is to think about, is there some aspect of your audience that you can feel a little bit of curiosity about? So I don't know if this has to do with the fact that your work is not inspiring you right now, or the people that you're trying to network with are feeling, uninteresting to you. That's totally fair. But what I would challenge you to try is, people are interesting, right? And multidimensional. So I would challenge you to maybe get outside of your idea of who those people are and see if you can find something about them that might make you curious. And it could even be, I'm curious about how I could change their mind, or I'm curious about what they had for breakfast this morning. Like, it doesn't have to be a deep thing about work. So I would challenge you to be curious about them on a human level, almost thinking of them as a character in a play, and start there and then see what kind of starts to come up for you. Because really, it ultimately is going to serve you to go into that interaction with curiosity rather than with sort of, I know everything about this person and I'm not curious.
A licensed clinical social worker starting a private practice, how much do you think your pitch would vary in different audiences?
That's a great question. I actually think that it can vary quite dramatically in terms of just what you choose to bring forward or what you choose to emphasize. Also, the tone that you choose to take, right? So if you're giving a formal presentation versus if you're, working with kids or something, your tone is going to be very different. And I think that what I'm kind of reading into this question, I don't know if this is part of your question, but is that concern that if I change too much for different audiences, does that mean that I'm being not genuine, right? Or does that mean that I'm like kind of veering too much off of center? And I actually think that you can stay rooted in your values and in your calling for all of those different tones that you take. And it's just sort of like molding the material into a different shape, but it's the same material.
Do you ever work with people with social anxiety? Talk a little bit about how that plays in here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that everyone that I've ever worked with has had some level of social anxiety that they deal with. Every single person that I've worked with describes some level of social anxiety and of nerves and nervousness stepping into leadership roles and presentation roles. So I think it's a spectrum.
I have a question about kind of like the context and communication level of the 4 C's in networking and interview settings. So I have a liberal arts background. I studied art history, but I work in data and I'm trying to go into finance. But when I'm in interviews and having conversations with people who are in finance and who are in the business world, I feel like a lot of people kind of lose interest or are kind of curious as like, why are you here then? Why are you interested in this? So I have a hard time, one, connecting, but then two, like pitching myself. So I, as a well-rounded person who has the liberal arts, humanities skills, but who also is able to do more quantitative stuff.
Gotcha. Wow. That's a great question. Well, I think I relate to you in this question a lot because I'm an artist. I'm obviously a very kind of wooey, crunchy person, and I like to bring my whole self into all interactions. So what I would invite you to try is, with that context piece, based on your obvious experience with interacting with these folks, is what again, getting into the curiosity about the audience and kind of trying to detach from judgment or, insecurity around, that difference between the sort of more quantitative and the more well-rounded or holistic, thinking about it like a bit like stepping into a costume. And I talk about this a lot with clients, the idea of archetypes. So you might play with the idea of, what is my natural archetype that I sort of fit into? Like, do I fit into sort of more of an artist archetype or, like a kind of a character that I naturally inhabit? So I would think about, what is the character, what is the energetic space that I sort of need to challenge myself to step into in order to meet these folks where they are, without muting my well-roundedness, that still comes into the room with me, but that if I want to be in a space where I'm expected to lead with a more quantitative way of communicating, how can I get inside of that character and inside of that way of communicating that feels authentic to me and that feels exciting to me? How can I get excited about communicating with that tone? Now we're going to move into trying some of this out, and don't be afraid. It's going to be an experiment, and we'll see how it goes. And we'll start out, staying in the room together, and we'll do the first 2 C's. I'm going to lead you all through the first 2 C's. So we've been kind of in like learning mode, maybe taking notes, looking at a presentation. Now we're going to actually take our focus away from looking at the screen and kind of focusing on me as teacher, and kind of going back into our physical space, into our bodies, into the room that we're actually in. We're going to start by going into that calling, that first C. And so I'm going to invite you to sit in your chair in a way that's most comfortable and supported. So not slouching, not totally falling into your chair, but really finding your feet on the ground, your sit bones supported underneath you, and maybe your hands just resting gently on the legs. I'll invite you to close your eyes and just go inward for a moment. So we can feel all the points of contact that our body is making with the ground, with itself between the hands and the legs, our sits bones on the chair. And as we feel into those points of contact, we begin to observe the breath just coming and going on its own. So within that sturdy, supportive structure of the skeleton, there's dynamic movement, there's flexibility, and there's the breath sustaining us, ebbing and flowing without us needing to do anything, right? And if you need to let out a little sigh to release some tension here, you can do that. But continuing to just observe the breath as it comes and goes on its own. Finding that quiet inner space that is unique and personal to you. And maybe this is the first time all day you've taken a moment to pause, or maybe you have a practice that you've already invested in today. But in this moment, just seeing if you can connect with some curiosity about what quality of presence is emerging for you in this relaxed but supported posture, accompanied by your breath. And in this internal space that you're cultivating here, that you can come into actually quite quickly, you're going to drop in, like a pebble dropping into a pond, the question, what am I being called to do? Or what am I called to do? Try not to overthink the question. Just ask that question, dropping it into that space. What am I being called to do? And just feel the kind of ripple effect of that question as it lands on the body, as it maybe impacts or shifts the quality of your breath. What am I called to do? As you're ready, I'm going to invite you to slowly flutter the eyelids open, coming back into the room, still feeling, though, that inner space that you cultivated so easily just by connecting to yourself. And as you're ready, grabbing pen and paper, and we're going to take 2 minutes to just free write on the answers to that question that came through for you, with as little censorship as possible, not thinking about our pitch, not thinking about our job. What am I being called to do? Just writing on that question as it lands for us today. And I'll give you 2 minutes to do that, and then we'll go to the next thing. Just about 10 more seconds. If you're in the middle of a sentence, just kind of finishing that or finishing that thought. And then just taking a moment to come away, coming back into yourself, away from the language. And maybe just feeling any way that your body has shifted, having just taken that couple of minutes to connect with yourself and to allow that question and answer to flow in an organic way. Any shifts that you might have experienced. That was calling, right? That was the first C. So the second C is content, right? So we can't just kind of show up at a networking event and start pontificating about our calling and, right? Maybe a certain networking event we could do that, but not all. So we want to take this raw material and give it a little polish, give it a little grit, right? So that it gets to a place where we're clear. That's really what we're after, is clarity. So that when the person is receiving it, they walk away with what we want them to walk away with. We've actually communicated what we wanted to communicate. I can't tell you how many times as a creative, multi-hyphenate, entrepreneurial kind of person, I have walked away from an interaction feeling like I undersold myself, or I didn't quite articulate what I do, because I do a lot of things, but I also, everything I do is centered around my values, right? It all connects for me. And so when I feel like I haven't articulated that in a fully aligned way, it's disappointing. And you walk away from that interaction feeling like, man, I'm more interesting than that, right? So we want to take control of that for ourselves and really deliver that message in the way we want to do it. And that's why this process, I think, is helpful. So all of that said, looking at your free write, if you have a highlighter, that could be a fun way to do it, or just with a pen or pencil. I want you to go through and circle phrases and words that pop out at you, that really feel potent, that feel connected to your values, that feel connected to your work, that feel connected to what you care about, what you're interested in, what your skills are, what you bring to the table. So just circle, and you don't have to think about it too much. Circle, underline those phrases and words. And maybe there's a full sentence in there that you want to keep. You're really just kind of honing away, chipping away at this sculpture, getting it more and more close to the fully polished version. So I'll just give you a little time to go through and find that raw material that you're going to then work with to construct your statement, your content. I'm going to shift into the final piece of content, which is taking that raw material, taking those phrases and those words, and then plugging them into a statement. Okay. You don't have to use all of them. You don't really actually have to use any of them. You could change the words if you want, but we're thinking of it. And this is why I use the image of pebbles, right? Because I like to think of language as like a medium. I mean, it is a medium, right? It's a medium for communication. So we're thinking of this as the raw material that we're gathering, shifting, adjusting, kind of plugging in until we get to a place that we feel good. And you can change the words out. You can use the exact language that you came up with in your free write if that feels true to you. But you're going to construct a statement in full sentences that is who you are, what you do, and how you do it, right? Sort of the classic elevator pitch, maybe 2 or 3 sentences. If you directly work with a particular group of people, you might mention who those people are. This is the piece that I think we've all probably done at some point before, right? But we're doing it now from a place where we're working with this raw material and experimenting and shifting and letting it kind of live and breathe. As you get these sentences down, you can start to speak these sentences aloud, drop in the language, start to listen to yourself saying these words. And that might inform you that I actually want to make this little adjustment, or wow, that really resonates with me. This feels really true to me. So as you get that written out, you might try speaking the statement aloud and just seeing how that lands on you today, seeing how that feels. We have about 2 more minutes to finish constructing our statement and then test it out, speaking it aloud to ourselves. You could also include, if you like, why you do it or who you do it for, if those things feel relevant to you. All right, so I know you're all still hard at work constructing, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving us forward. And this is something you can continue adjusting. There's no need for it to formally end. I would love to just ask if there are maybe 1 or 2 group representatives who want to talk about what came up for you, what your reflections were, how the pitching went, what you found challenging. Any reflections on how those breakout rooms were?
All of us are sort of preparing for our next venture. So, we're kind of in between things and a little bit unclear about where we're going. So none of us really had the elevator pitch.
Interesting to be in that space because we can still sort of give a pitch about ourselves, even if we don't have a job, right? Because the way that we're kind of constructing these pitches is to do with more than just what our job is. It also has to do with what we're interested in, what our values are, who we are in the world. It might be interesting to go through the process without knowing what your job is and be able to kind of speak to maybe what your history has been, if that still feels relevant, and also maybe what kind of position you're looking for based on what your values are, and to sort of build a pitch around that. Because that can be an awkward moment when someone says, "What do you do?" And then you have to say, "Oh, well, I'm looking for a job right now." But that's not all you are, right? So you have something to pitch, even if you don't have specific work to pitch. And I think this system can still work for that. Anybody want to talk a little bit about what came through around the context of this workshop and kind of observations you made about the given circumstances of this networking opportunity?
What I noticed, which was interesting, was that we all talked about, as women, how we need to sort of get better at sort of bragging about ourselves, but we all sort of started with our resume, Smith, MFA, or whatever it was. And I thought that's something that I noticed that makes this today, what you're doing, really important, because it allows us to realize what we're automatically doing as far as, rattling off our resume, and instead coming from a place of total humanness, so, our human self and who we are, and sort of detaching it from our accolades or whatever. I noticed that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that doing this kind of a process and this kind of an integration system can be really helpful for finding those authentic links between what you truly value and who you are on, like you said, a human level, with those accolades and with background and with the work you are currently doing. Because often we feel like those are 2 separate buckets. But actually, if we do a little more digging and a little more investigation, we can find how the 2, they don't maybe link in every single way, but we can find where those links are. And then we can represent that when we're talking about our work to people. So it feels more like it's coming from a human place.
As a social worker, sometimes people who are outside of that realm are a little bit patronizing in conversation, and will say "Oh, that's such important work," in ways that they kind of mean it, but they also believe their value, which is shown by the money they make. Any thoughts on that? How you assert your value in spaces where maybe you're not as clearly valued by the people you're talking to?
I think that the first thing that I would say is that usually when someone gives a response like that lands on you as patronizing, it's because that's all they know to say. And they they categorize you based on what they know of what your work is in the world, and they actually don't have a very nuanced or fully fledged understanding of your career. And so I think the first thing is to just try not to take it personally, but know that that is probably just their attempt to relate or to find something to say if they don't really know what else to say. And from that space, again, to go into the curiosity piece and see if there's some inroad where, when you're not kind of battling that defensive feeling that you get when you get that kind of response from someone, if you reframe their response as, oh, they don't really know much about my work, this is an opportunity for me to actually give them a more holistic picture. And it might be true that they're being patronizing, but I think for you, it's helpful to reframe that response as, oh, this is an opportunity for me to give them a more holistic picture of what I do, and to kind of also engage their sense of, if they're saying, oh, this is important work, well, what about it do you think is important, right? And to sort of engage them on that level, so that you're having a human connection around the work. And then maybe they start to open up a little bit more and actually listen and actually learn from you about what it is that you do.
When I heard that comment, I thought it was flattering. To me, listening to that, had someone said that to me, I would have said, well, thank you so much. It's my calling. It's what I love to do. To me, it was a completely flattering thing for someone to say. I would say thank you.
That's such a beautiful observation. And I think it takes a level of confidence and a level of actually sitting in. Yes. Like when someone says that, and to be able to receive that, even if their tone is patronizing, or even if it's not, to be able to take that in and, like you said, affirm that, yes, it is really meaningful work. Thank you. I think when we're in occupations like the arts, like social work, things where we're really following our passion, people like sort of expect us to be these sort of pure, like, people who are just love we do all the time. And the reality is that it can be really hard sometimes to be in those kinds of careers, right? So we can have that defensiveness. We can lead with that defensiveness and feel like we have to protect our values. But what you said is so beautiful. And I think cultivating that ability to step into the purest form of why we do what we do, which is because it is a calling and it comes from within. That is extremely powerful, like you said, to someone who is not in a vocational career and could open up all kinds of inroads for authentic human connection. It's possible to maybe engage them outside of their job title if that feels like the appropriate thing to do, and actually seek to make a more human connection.
I do want to give Emily a chance to share with you a little bit about her work.
So I have what I call my embodied voice mentorship, and this is a 12-week mentorship that includes weekly 60-minute Zoom sessions. It's highly personalized, it's goal-oriented, and like this workshop, it's integrative and reflective. So it's very unique to you, your particular communication and leadership goals. And we really parse out your challenges and we celebrate with you on, growth steps as you go. That's the larger container for one-on-one work. I also offer embodied voice deep dives, and there are 3 different tracks you can choose for specific topics: personal presence and power, transformative vocal technique, and storytelling superpower. And I'm offering a 10% discount for Smith alums.
We also have a great LinkedIn group for folks to connect around their professional aspirations, ask questions, share job postings. We have about 4,300 Smithies in this LinkedIn group now, so please join us if you're not already there and just deepen your connection with other Smithies. Keep an eye out for your email from Smith on that LinkedIn group. We really want to be able to offer opportunities for you all to connect with one another and level up your careers in ways that are meaningful to you, whatever that may be. Thanks, Emily, for this great workshop.